like, ultimately, I don't know if the British government will be talking about the protocol in a week's time. They are very, very adept at dipping in and out of Brexit, the protocol, the issues in Northern Ireland when it suits them, and then they go back to dealing up with levelling up or whatever domestic issue they're dealing with. This is the issue for today. Probably won't be the issue on Wednesday in London. But ultimately, you have a situation where the EU has to react. The EU will react. As Aoife said, they'll likely unpause legislation that was paused as a message of goodwill during the autumn. They'll probably start other legislation too. And where this leads to ultimately is the potential collapse of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And if that does happen, the people who will suffer the most are the people of Great Britain, and it's their government they'll have to thank.
Well, it's also the people of the North.
I was just going to say I disagree. I truly believe that the people who are going to suffer the most are the people in Northern Ireland, the people who the protocol affects the most and whose voice is consistently not heard at the table. There was a letter today signed by a majority of MLAs asking the British government not to do this. Our people will live under this protocol and this is not what we want. But it has become obvious over time, over years, that the Conservative government does not care for Northern Ireland in the way that they say that they do. And it is the people of Northern Ireland that pay the price. Everyone is screaming at them, from businesses to the people, to the elected MLAs who were just elected last month. And they're going to power on ahead regardless.
Claire, a really important part of this that many people have missed is this legislation actually removes the method of consent from the Assembly that was part of the protocol. This legislation takes out that 4-year cooling off period where Assembly members, doesn't matter which political tradition from, have to vote in the protocol again. This removes it. So you have a government talking about wanting to protect the Good Friday Agreement and restore consent, but yet they're removing the mechanism from the elected representatives of the people of the North.
Darren, isn't there an awful lot of contradiction in sort of what has been announced today? The issue around consent, as Louise pointed to there, majority of the people in the North didn't want Brexit to happen. That's the fact of the matter here.
Indeed, but we can have those battles, but we are where we are. And my point is that we are where we are, but there is no consent in Northern Ireland for the protocol. A majority of unionists, the vast majority of unionists, don't want to see it. And your panellists can stick their fingers in their ears and ignore unionists in Northern Ireland, but frankly, there is no Stormont because of the protocol to a large degree.
What's going to happen now, Darren, is sort of saying, if you're saying, and unionists, and yes, you're right, unionists in the North are not all happy, some are not all happy with the protocol, but what difference really is any of this going to make, other than cause that instability we've been talking about?
Well, I think, first of all, it's an attempt by the British government to try and address some of the concerns of those unionists. This is an internal UK matter, and clearly those unionists are pretty angry about it.
Yeah, with implications for the island of Ireland.
Well, but of course there are. Brexit has had massive implications for lots of places. I'm not here to defend Brexit. I'm here to kind of set out where the British government are thinking. Let's just say, first of all, as your panellists pointed out, as Bertie Ahern has pointed out, this is going to have a really difficult ride through Parliament. It's possible there'll be a big rebellion in the Commons. The House of Lords will almost certainly object. This is going to be a long process. Many think primarily it's a negotiating tactic. And all I would say on the protocol to date is there have been problems with it. And at every stage, on the whole, the EU have compromised. They've moved along. And maybe the positions actually between Brussels and London in trying to get to terms with some of the problems that persist are not that far apart. But also in the end, and we cannot ignore this, and your panel have not talked about it, is that unionists are not going to go back into Stormont unless there are substantial changes to the protocol. And frankly, that means Dublin had to be part of that process as well. The EU have to be part of that process, because if you genuinely are concerned about the future of Northern Ireland, that means you have to address unionist concerns as well as nationalist concerns.
OK, the DUP being at the nub of this, Louise, so essentially we do have this stalemate in Stormont. Nothing is happening there. The people in the North do need a government.
And Sinn Féin stands ready to lead the Assembly.
Because of that, is there a need for a renegotiation or talking around this or coming to some sort of a settlement?
OK, but for 8 months, the European Union have been turning up to negotiate, and the British Tory government have been leaving them sitting in a room on their own. You cannot have a negotiation with yourself. If that was possible, this would be over now. So there has been scope for negotiation, and that just backs what all of us are saying, essentially, which is that this is nothing got to do with the North and everything got to do with internal Tory party machinations, and that is what's causing this, and that's what's driving it. And they may pick up this issue today, they may drop it the next day, but unfortunately it's the people in the North who are going to be left. They're the ones who are at the business end of this. And actually, if they were thinking about them, they've had 8 months to turn up to talk about the issues. I mean, when it was necessary, issues in relation to medicine were overcome and an accommodation was reached. So, the will is there on the part of the European Union. I just don't see any reciprocal will on the part of the Tory government.
Are they likely to go anywhere with this? Like, we had Maros Sefcovic saying the EU will not renegotiate the Northern Ireland Protocol agreement, Neale. It's unrealistic. It would simply bring further legal uncertainty for people and businesses in the north. So what are we likely to see now in retaliation to this move?
As I said, you'll see the legal action unpaused, you'll see new legal action started. And there's this notion, and Darren has parroted it there from the British government, that the EU have compromised every time the British government have made one of these dramatic interventions or threatened to break international law. Don't forget, before the protocol, there was a backstop, but the protocol was a reversion to what the EU proposed already. So there isn't this sort of notion that the EU needs to change their mandate, and it's throwing everything on the EU. Liz Truss has not shown up for a Brexit implementation meeting since the 24th of February. There has been no engagement. There is no engagement on the paper produced by Maros Sefcovic in the autumn, which directly responded to the concerns of business, agriculture and community leaders in Northern Ireland. This is not about, oh, the EU, you have to turn around, you have to change.
Are we looking at a potential trade war scenario here then? I mean, if you're saying that, that this is what they've come out with today, no one has turned up to the negotiating table over issues to date, where can it go from here?
Well, I'm loath to use the term trade war when there's an actual war happening in Europe, and I think that would focus a lot of minds when you think what people in the continent are dealing with, 4 million refugees in Poland, and yet we have yet another strop from the British government. But we do have the inevitable conclusion that this will lead to the collapse of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. It's a very thin deal, but it makes sure that there isn't tariffs, there isn't quotas, you don't have 45% additional cost on Irish goods going into Great Britain and vice versa. And Aoife quite correctly said the people who suffer the most, of course, are the people in Northern Ireland of all communities. But economically, the people in Great Britain who are suffering more than anyone else in the EU, based on the current crisis, will suffer even more again, thanks to the efforts of their own government to have their own little fight outlined.